When you hear standardized testing, you probably think of, filling in bubbles with a number 2 pencil. But what if I told you the real story, the origin story, starts 4,000 years ago? We are about to dig into the ancient roots of the modern test, and trust me, it's a history you probably haven't heard before.
So let me ask you this. Do you think these big, high-stakes exams are a modern thing? I mean, it's a pretty common assumption, right? But it's not even close to being true.
Yeah, the real answer is way, way bigger. The core concept behind standardized testing, having a systematic way to see who's right for an important job, goes back more than 4,000 years. And nope, that is not a typo. We're talking about an idea that's older than the Roman Empire.
And here's the real twist. The whole idea didn't come from the West. It all started in Imperial China. They developed this incredibly sophisticated program for a really specific reason: to find the absolute best and brightest people to run the country. This wasn't just some quiz, it was the bedrock of their entire government. So how in the world did this ancient system actually work? Let's get into the details of this imperial blueprint, because it would go on to change the entire world. Centuries later, of course.
What's so cool here is that you can see how this idea didn't just appear overnight. It grew and evolved. It starts out simple, 4,000 years ago, with just oral exams for job promotions. Then, you fast forward to the Han Dynasty, and they've developed what they called test batteries, basically using a whole series of tests. But the real peak, the perfection of the system, comes during the Ming Dynasty, when it becomes this huge, national, multi-stage program.
And these were not easy tests, not by a long shot. Even way back in the Han Dynasty, they were covering all these practical subjects that you'd actually need to run a government. We're talking civil law, military strategy, agriculture, how to handle revenue, geography. The whole point was to find really capable administrators, not just academics who are good at memorizing things.
Okay, so now let's jump to the Ming Dynasty, where this thing really becomes an epic challenge. It was this grueling 3-part process. First, you had to pass your local exams, and they even had special booths to make sure nobody cheated. If you passed that, you got to move on to the provincial exams, which were even harder essay tests. And only the top performers from that round got to travel to the nation's capital for the final showdown.
And this is the part you really gotta understand. Passing this test was everything. Your entire career, your social standing, your family's future, it all came down to this one exam. This quote says it all. It was the only way in. The stakes just could not have been any higher.
So for thousands of years, this system of building a government based on merit was kind of China's secret weapon. But you know how it is with good ideas. Eventually, they start to travel. And this one began a journey from east to west that set off a global chain reaction. But how did it get there? Not through war, not through trade, but through simple observation. British missionaries and diplomats who were in China saw this super effective system firsthand. They wrote back home about it, describing how the Chinese were picking their government officials based on talent, not because of who their father was. And people in the West started paying attention. And this slide just perfectly shows that aha moment. The English East India Company, which was this huge global powerhouse back then, saw the absolute genius in the Chinese model. They took that core idea, use a test to find the best person for the job, and they adapted it for their own needs, finding qualified people to work for them overseas.
So once the idea was adapted, and once it was proven to actually work in a Western company, it was like lighting a fuse. It kicked off this rapid domino effect that would build the foundation for the modern civil service that we know today.
The first domino falls in 1832. That's when the English East India Company officially starts using the Chinese system to hire its people. Now, this was a radical idea in Britain, where everything was about your family connections. But it worked. It proved that hiring based on merit was a really effective way to do things. All right, just about 20 years later, in 1855, the second domino topples. The British government itself, seeing how well it worked for the company, decides to create its own civil service exams. This is a massive moment. The idea officially jumps from the world of business into the very heart of Western government. And then comes the final key domino. In 1883, the idea crosses the Atlantic. The United States government, which was trying to get away from a system where politicians just gave jobs to their friends, creates the Civil Service Commission. And just like that, competitive exams became the new standard. That 4,000-year-old idea was now officially part of the American system. So,
Let's just take a step back and appreciate this whole incredible journey. We've literally followed a single idea from its ancient beginnings all the way to the systems that run the countries we live in today.
When you boil it all down, it's about this one powerful concept: meritocracy. The idea that your ability should matter more than your family name. This 4,000-year-old idea for finding talent went on this incredibly journey, and in the process, it literally built the framework for the modern world.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big question. We know now that the standardized tests we use today aren't some new invention. They are the direct descendants of a system that's been around for millennia. So, the real question is, what does its ancient and surprisingly durable history tell us about its place and its future in our world?